Hey everybody, this is Linda Misegadis, and you're listening to An Unconventional Guide to Success, the show that talks about real life with real people for those of you who are interested in learning from others the steps they took on their journey towards success as defined by them. Good morning and welcome to the studio, Scott. It's so good to see you.
Linda, pleasure's always mine. Good to see you too. Lady in red today, I see.
Lady in red today. Yes, exactly. So
glowing.
Yeah.
Fire.
Well, and I took a shower as well. So I have clean hair today too. So, just for you.
Teresa should be really happy with this.
Absolutely.
Morning too.
Good.
Goals in life, I tell you. Yes, it's those little things that matter most. So, well, I'm so excited to have Therese Zuercher in the studio with us today. I'll give you a little background. Therese actually has her BS in International Business and an MS in Organizational Development from the University of Colorado. Go Colorado. She spent her first 25 years of her career in human resources, starting as an HR assistant at a Fortune 50 company and ending her HR career as a regional HR manager for the largest integrated cash distribution network in the U.S.
Wow.
In 1991, her husband Brad and her started a company called Rocky Mountain Hydrostatics that provided parts and repair services for hydraulic pumps and motors. They actually grew that business from $30K in the first year to $14 million in 2020 when they sold 70% to a publicly traded company. Teresa's goal was to retire after a one-year transition to their new management team. So welcome to the studio, Therese.
Thank you.
Good to see you here. I'm really excited to hear about what your business was about and how you got that transitioned out. I think there's some parallels here in what we're doing at WorldGate too. So it'll be fun to hear how it's going.
I totally agree. I think this is going to be a fun one because you both are entrepreneurs and really have grown your businesses quite significantly. And so it's really, this should be a fun one for us to talk about. But before we get into that, Therese, we always like to start out with an icebreaker. And so my question is, if you could hang out with any cartoon character, who would you choose and why?
That was, I got the question yesterday, and that was a really hard one for me because I'm kind of old and I haven't been around cartoons for a really long time. Joel's my youngest at 28. So I haven't even watched cartoons for a long time, but I thought about it. And so my answer is Winnie the Pooh.
Ooh, that was Caitlin's. That was my wife's.
It was Caitlin's, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So I think I like Winnie the Pooh because he's always really positive and he always brings his friends up, even when they're feeling down. He has a great outlook on life, even if something is bad, that it can always get better. And that's kind of like how I want to be. I want to help people out and I want to bring them up and I want to be seen as happy all the time. So
wow.
I'm referred to at work, even though most of our new employees, our VP and some of our managers are in their mid-50s. They refer to me as mom. So that's kind of the role I take as mom for everybody. So.
Oh, great.
I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. She's so nice,
What
Linda.
about you?
Ours aren't always as nice.
I know. Yeah.
What are we going to do with this? How are we going to manage this, Linda?
I know. How are we going to manage this? That's right. Well, Scott, who are you going with?
Well,
today?
you know where I'm at. I'm the Incredible Hulk. Arrgh.
Yes.
All's good and trying to make things better until I switch, and then I'm a powerhouse trying to fix things and like you, Teresa, trying to move the ball forward for the next generation.
No, I like that. I think that's good. I'm going to go with Lucy today in the spirit of going into the holiday season and thinking about, usually I like my good friends over in Marvel or with the Looney Tunes. But today I thought, the Peanuts. And the reason why I chose Lucy is aside from the fact that she's a bit of a know-it-all, which I'm going to admit I have been called that myself at times. I do think that Lucy has a good heart, and I think that she really does try to help in her own way. So I'm going to go with Lucy. I think she'd be an interesting person to understand, like what motivates her to pull that football away from Charlie Brown's.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, little antagonist there too, I see.
Yeah, I'd like to understand that a little bit. So
I would say you're not a know-it-all too. Don't self-deprecate. What you know well.
Thanks.
Say it that way.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. I'll take it. In the spirit of niceness, I'll take that one.
That's right. We're going to put on a show for Theresa today. We're going to be kind.
That's what we're going to be kind today. Yes. I like that. Well, Theresa, we'll jump right in. You do a lot of work helping at-risk youth. What's the motivation for that? Like, what draws you to that particular interest?
Very interesting. So I started it about 6-7 years ago. So my oldest son, Joshua, I don't know if you know this, Linda, was sexually molested as a young boy. And it caused a lot of issues for him. We took him to a therapist. Well, we went to the police. It happened to be a boy who lived across the street from us, who was a friend. We always warn people about, strangers in the bathroom at a bus station or something, but really generally somebody that's close by. He acted out a lot. We had a lot of issues with him. Went to college, ended up being an alcoholic, drinking a lot to control all of that. He went to rehab. He was gone for a couple of years. Doing well now, but will always be something that he fights.
Yeah.
But what we found was that there weren't a lot of resources for teenagers or youth with mental health issues. We were lucky. At that time, it was before Obamacare, so insurance companies didn't have to cover or didn't cover rehab. They didn't cover a lot of therapy. And we were lucky because we had the means to take care of it, even though it was tough. I mean, there were a lot of things we had to do in order to get that money to be able to do that. And so living in Brighton, I would get these notices or newspapers talking about CASA, which is the Court Appointed Special Advocate Program. Most counties, a lot of counties in the U.S. have them. Adams County happens to have one, and they kept looking for mentors for kids who are in the system and have issues. So finally, after about the third one, I said, this is talking to me. I think this is something that I need to do. So I went and got trained as a CASA, and I became a CASA for a young boy who at the time was 10 years old. I'm still with him today at 16. In between times, he was living with his mom. He lived in a shelter. Then his mom lost custody of him. Then she lost not just custody, but they took her parental rights away. He ended up in the foster system. His mother passed away a couple years after that happened, and he's moved to a couple different foster homes, but I'm still with him. So I'm the only one that has been with him this whole time. So I just stay engaged with him. He, it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do, especially for someone like me.
No.
I want to take in all the dogs. I want to take in all the kids. I want to, it was always great having my sons. I have 3 sons, Scott, 28, 30, and 32. And we always had a lot of kids. My kids tend to migrate towards those kids who need help. And they always ended up in my house. And I think it's just what I like to do. I like to be the mom, I guess. So, and I have to say, so I'm the same way at work. I'm in a male-dominated. I'm in a male-dominated industry. Everybody that worked, I'm the only female that worked for the company up until we sold the business, and then the person who replaced me happens also to be a female. So I've acted as the mom to all the guys at work as well, all those young single guys that worked for us for all those years. So
wonderful.
Yeah, it's been a rewarding thing. I'm not sure that I would do it again.
Thank you for sharing
that. I would take on another kid. I think,
but it sounds like you're really turning lemonade out of the lemons.
Yeah. Yep. That's it.
Yeah. No, that does. That's wonderful that you've done that. I'm curious then, because of that, but also just with what you've done to grow the business, and relationships are clearly something that are important in your success. I'm just kind of curious what your thought is around relationships versus partnerships, and kind of how that's played a role in your success, both when you were in HR, but also as an entrepreneur with the company.
Yeah. It's funny because I had never intended on being an HR person. I kind of fell into it when I was a temp, working for a temp agency back in the days when there was actually temp agencies. I did a lot of clerical work, a lot of different companies. And I was at CU, and I always came home at the summertime, and I worked for this temp agency that sent me out on a long-term assignment the summer before my senior year of school. And it was a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC for short. They also were called Baby Blue, so they were just under IBM. So basically, it was IBM and Digital. That was it. That's all it was. Digital had 100,000 employees.
Wow.
Amazing company. It was an amazing company for me to learn from. Anyway, so I worked in their HR department, just doing administrative stuff. And when the summer was over, the HR manager said, "Hey, when you graduate, contact us, and maybe there'll be something here for you." So I graduated and really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Why I picked international business. Loved to travel, spoke foreign languages. I had started my college career majoring in German. Why, I don't know. I mean, I lived in Colorado. Where the hell am I going to use German?
Is Zuercher sort of an indication?
No, I wasn't a Zuercher then. I was a Ferris.
Okay.
Zuercher's my husband's name, so I can't really tell you. Well, I took it because my sister, her husband was stationed in Germany, so I thought, I'm gonna take German, and I'm gonna go visit my sister someday.
That's so cool.
Of course, I never got over there when she was there. I was an exchange student in Berlin in high school.
Right.
Anyway, so that's where I started. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do international business. Well, in Colorado, there wasn't a whole lot of international business. Maybe now there might be.
Now probably,
some,
but in the 80s,
certainly
not so much.
Nobody that needed anyone who spoke German.
Yeah.
I also took Arabic in college.
Oh.
So that was another crazy thing. Anyway, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. So when I got done, I took the easy way out, and I called Digital, and they were like, "Oh yeah, by the way, our personnel assistant is going to sell her house, and she's going to go live on a boat with her husband. You want to come back and take this job." So I went back and I took the job, not knowing anything about human resources. But it turned out that it was a good fit for me because I really was more of a people person. So I spent 25 years in the HR world, 10 years with Digital, which, like I said, I was super lucky because they were 100,000 employee company with a lot of resources, a lot of training, learned how to do HR the right way.
Yeah.
And then I worked for two other. I'm one of those that stayed at companies for a long time. I worked for Ryder Trucks back in the day, which is now Budget, I think. I worked in their national call center as their HR manager, and then I worked for Loomis Fargo and Company, the big armored car company, which was another really different thing for me because they had a union, and I'd never worked with unions before. I never negotiated before, and I had to negotiate, and also had to deal with employees that were dealing with a lot of cash and carrying weapons. So completely,
Yeah, that's got a lot of diversity, a lot of issues.
A lot of diversity.
Yeah.
But this whole time, basically, I graduated college in 1984. From 1990 or 89, 1990, when Brad and I got married. So Brad was a field service engineer for a company out of Ohio. Company called called Denison Hydraulics. When we met and he decided to move to Colorado to be with me, we were like, well, heck, what are you going to do? He went to work for the distributor out here and got really bored. Brad is super, super smart, has lots of ideas. I'm not the entrepreneur in the company. Brad's the entrepreneur in the company. But Brad likes to take a lot of risks.
You're the stability, I'm
there's
guessing.
some parallels here, Scott, as I'm listening to Therese talk.
Really well together. It's kind of crazy that we're awesome. So opposites, and that we've done well after we've been married 33 years and ran a business the whole time. We were a good match for each other.
I bet that helped. I bet that helped with raising the kids too. So then you guys had some flexibility being self-employed, and you were able to do all things for all people, right?
I was working the whole time up until the last, for the first 25 years, I worked because we were building the business and we had to have an income. So I worked basically and took care of the kids. We, up until 20 years ago, we had a large manufacturing or large building in North Aurora. And at one point, like you said, with the kids, I was like, this just doesn't make sense. This is just really hard for me to try and manage working and taking care of the kids and having you up at the business and doing everything. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go look for some property where we can have the business and the house on the same property. Great. And my husband thought I was nuts. And one day I just got up and put the kids in the car and went driving around looking for large enough lots that we could do that. And we ended up in Brighton, and we built our business first. And all 5 of us lived in a steel building for a year.
Wow!
While they were building our house, and so it worked out perfectly because the boys could come home from school, and Brad would be at the shop, and they were basically, at least there was an adult around.
Yeah, you can.
And then I could go out and do what I needed to do.
Yeah, and vice versa. Yeah. And the kids got the benefit of both parents. That's wonderful. And you know what I like that you say about that, Theresa, for our listeners and for our viewers, is that it's that easy, even though it's that big. You literally got in the car and drove around. These intersections in life really do come that easily to people if they grab them. So it's really admirable to hear that you were able to do both pieces of that. And I just wanted to highlight that. So tell us more. Keep going. Yeah.
Sometimes I look back and I have PTSD over thinking about some of the things that we did, raising 3 kids and doing everything that we did. One of the things
PTSD.
Yeah.
I'm in it, by the way. I have 3 kids in my own business too, and our parallels are very similar. And my wife is on the wall on the other side of me, and we're doing the exact same thing. So I know what PTSD feels like.
Well, yeah. So we, just so that you know, it's a little bit of background of our employees that we started, because you don't just go out there and find hydraulic technicians to work for you
in Colorado.
And I think exactly. And I think in some of my notes I wrote about how really important it was for us. We kind of felt like a family. We, as we grew this company,
that's important.
It tells you a lot in the fact that I have 2 employees that worked for or went through school. I don't know if you know, like the VOTEC programs.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had 2 of them who came from an Aurora VOTEC program in the machine shop trades. Okay. And we hired both of them right out of high school. Well, actually, they kind of interned with us their senior years. And they still work for us today, 21 years later.
Wow.
And that is so funny, Theresa. We have the same here, except for they were both fresh out of college, and they've been here for 15 years. Our 2 HR and sales reps, and it's... Yeah, that's so interesting. Our parallels. People should pay attention to this. I mean, we're novelty, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Get to drive your own future and your own path moving forward. So, please. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, and then obviously they've all really been bought into the business being successful. I mean, in some parts it's really hard in the fact that they've never worked for anybody else. And sometimes I think they don't realize how good they have it.
So true.
Since we've started to, since we've started to grow, That's probably been the most painful since we started to grow, and we've brought other employees in, and we've also been really careful about who we bring in. They may not necessarily be the most technical, but they're the people we know are going to get along the best with our other employees.
Culture matters.
The culture was super important.
Yep.
And it's been good in the fact that, when some of our long-term employees start to whine about something and they come up and like, what are you talking about? Like, do you understand what the real world is like? Stop your whining. You guys, get to do whatever you want. But that was probably the most difficult part for us as we grew, is not being able to treat everybody as employees and kind of stepping back, especially as owners, not being so involved in their lives and those kinds of things, because that's really hard, to manage them when you're that close. And in the beginning, I think we've had several family members, mostly from my side, because I'm from Colorado and that's where they're at, work for us. And some of them work out, some of them don't. I mean, my husband had to fire my brother because he just wasn't doing his job. And that makes it really difficult. We had to fire a nephew. And while my brother, we get along really well with my brother, and there's no hard feelings there. We didn't talk to my nephew for years.
Well, I'd like to highlight, if I may, Teresa, real quick, I'd like to highlight right there about that culture and about that young entrepreneur or that solopreneur who is trying to do the right thing by their family, by long-term employees, by long-term relationships. One of the things that I think I hear you highlighting that I will certainly advocate for is, when it doesn't fit, fix it and don't let it linger, because then you squeak by saying, oh, I was able to salvage the relationship after I realized he wasn't working for us for 4 years.
Right.
The lesson I'd like to highlight in that is exactly what you're yesing. And that is, to these guys who are out there trying to do this, and they're needing inexpensive help. They're needing honest and familial help. Don't hold on to that too long if it's not trajecting the business moving forward. Would you say that's a fair statement?
That's a very fair statement. And I think where we were able to control some of it goes towards those goals we talked about on setting, setting goals for, whether you're setting goals for yourself or you're setting goals for employees, and luckily, based on my background, we know how to set goals. And I think, we talk about the SMART goals. And when you set goals for people, especially something that they buy into, and they're reasonable goals, they're attainable goals,
smart, measurable, achievable
to them.
Smart.
Smart. Exactly.
Specific, measurable, achievable.
They can't disagree with that. Either they make their goals or they don't make their goals. And it makes it a whole lot easier.
Well, and the theme of our podcast started with my book, and I always plug my book in here at some point, so forgive that. But when you talk about, Teresa, the parallels that you and I have, we'll have to talk offline sometime because it's magical in just the first 15 minutes. But specific goals I'd like to highlight for our listeners, and that is that they're clear and well-defined, they're measurable, quantifiable, achievable, make sure the goal can actually be accomplished, realistic. A goal must be something that you are both willing and able to work towards, and they're time-bound. Without a timeline, you are far more likely to fall off the wagon. So when you mentioned SMART goals, I just wanted to take a minute, step back, and that's really important when you're starting to own a business, or like you said, it's something you learn as you go. If we can share that up front for our entrepreneurs, I wanted to highlight that. So thank you for letting me go back and look at that. It's actually in chapter 4 of my book.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
And that's a big HR. That's a big HR thing. So from my point, you do it as an owner for people who are owners, but as a manager, you do it with your employees. That way there's no question, and they want it. I think that's one of the things that it's really difficult for my exactly. They need to know what those boundaries are. They need to know what their goals are. They need to know, maybe there's some positions that they don't, but I don't know. I think it's really important that they have that. That's been real difficult for me to explain to, as we grew, just so you know. So as we grew, we went away from a lot of commercial work. So for example, we do hydraulics that would do, so one of my customers is a company called LK. LK makes steel sinks. you walk through Home Depot, you'll see all sorts of sinks and like water fountains and those kinds of things. And they press this metal into the shapes of these sinks, and our hydraulics would run that. So most of our early career was doing commercial work. Then we got into the Navy stuff. When I met Brad, we were at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, and I was on my way back home to Denver, and he was on his way to Norfolk to work on a Navy ship. And so Brad spent a lot of time working for the OEM, installing or troubleshooting equipment on Navy ships. And that's ended up the direction that we ended up. Now, 95%, maybe 98% of our work is all Navy work. Wow. One of the reasons why I'm here, I'm in San Diego right now. I'm in a bus, in case you didn't know it, is because we're working on the Roosevelt right now. The Roosevelt is in port in San Diego, and we have an office here in San Diego, and Brad's out here to make sure. Brad's here as the technical liaison if there's any issues with our guys doing the work on the ship. So most of our work is ship work now. I say all that to say, moving into the Navy world and growing on both coasts in Norfolk and in San Diego, we hired a lot of retired military officers.
Sure.
And they were career officers.
Yeah.
So we're talking 35 years in the Navy, starting out at 18, totally different mindset than what you have in
today's
the
millennials.
Real world.
Yeah,
exactly. So, they're used to being an officer, and when they say something, then the person needs to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've had to work, even though I was trying to retire. I stayed on up until a couple weeks ago before I finally said, I'm done. I'm not going to do any more work for you. Integrating them into what our world is and how to deal with employees, and how to integrate our main office in Denver, which is where we do most of our manufacturing, with the guys who are out in the field, so that it's one company versus trying to deal with three different companies, because that's how they were acting.
And one of the things I'm hearing, Teresa, that might be good for our listeners, and again, just in the phase that you're sort of cresting into, wanting to pay it forward, right? You're not doing the physical work anymore. You're retired. I'm out, but I'm hearing you want to be on podcasts. You're doing panel discussions. This next generation needs to hear things like you're talking about. And I'd like to drill down a little bit into that SMART goal area, if we may, and talk about the difference you found between goals and objectives. And that differentiator between an objective where the commanders are coming in and saying, here's what you need to do to reach our goal. That's an objective. And how maybe your millennials are seeing that as maybe a task, or what was your experience on the differentiators there? Yeah.
Yeah. I think we definitely didn't go the way towards the Navy way, the objective way.
Okay.
Even though obviously there's an objective, there's an end goal of how we're going to do things.
Sure.
It's interesting because I don't want to force fit people into a certain way of doing things, because managers have different way of doing things. My guy on the East Coast, very straight, and it's funny because employees he ended up hiring are the ones that are going to do it the way he wants it. He's pretty rigid, and everything is organized there whereas on the West Coast, which you would expect. I mean, it's East Coast versus West Coast. It's not even just one military type versus another military type. Much more laid back. Both of the managers of both branches were both in the military for the same amount of time. They were both 35-year officers, but handle things very differently. One is super strict, the other one is super laid back. And I'm like, okay, well, how do we kind of meet in the middle with that one?
Yeah.
And so we did go over SMART goals. I mean, they know SMART goals now. They learned how to do it. And guess what? They have to develop goals for all of their employees. And I think that has helped a lot. You still have one that's a little bit rigid, one that's a little bit lax, but that's okay. That's how they deal with their employees, and it works for them. And we're kind of in the middle. My biggest issue was them trying to manage my employees, I still call them my employees, in Denver, and saying, okay, this is the way I want it to work. Well, no, that's not the way that it works for them.
Yeah.
We've been
That's
doing
tough.
this for a long time. And it's difficult when you've been doing things for a long time. Well, as an entrepreneur, just because you're a good entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good leader or that you're a good manager. It's just like
Very true.
in the
Very
real
true.
world, we tend to take employees who are good individual contributors and make them managers because we think they're going to be good managers. And we don't give them the training, and they're really not good managers. And it may not necessarily be your best individual contributor who's the best manager. And you end up with those, what do they call them? Leaders who don't have the title, but they're seen as the leaders. And those are the people that you need to look at. So you're raising your eyebrows.
Robin Sharma wrote that book, The Leader with No Title. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly
it's very powerful. What you're talking about is really, it's a distinction that's really nice to hear another entrepreneur talk about, or another business owner, really, because you've left solopreneur, you left entrepreneur, you've got a business. And, I know what you were talking about just in sharing with you a little bit about how I started with a $15,000 contract and run a $12 million organization. And I had my 2 first employees, and now they've been with me for 15 years, and I've got 100 employees now. So I totally know what you're talking about. And what's really nice, and the reason I share that for our listeners, is that the parallel in industry is the parallel in business ownership is the same regardless of industry. We sell consulting services. We implement in government agencies, school districts, and you were doing hydraulics and moved it over to government agencies. And you hired old commanders, and I hired old school administration staff. And the mix is just amazing to listen to today. Really important for our listeners who are cresting into business to have that sort of collective awareness for their next step. So I just want to highlight that a little bit.
To your point. No, I'm glad you did that, Scott, because it does it goes along with the line, right, of an unconventional guide to success, because it's the path. And while you and Therese took very different paths, there's so many parallels, in that in order for you to both get to those outcomes, you still followed goals and good habits and relationships, and the fact that you both are working with your spouses, and that you've been able to keep that relationship partnership for all these years as well, speaks volumes as well. But what it really does is it highlights that there are very specific steps that anybody needs to take in life and to achieve those outcomes. And I think that you both have, you've just got it's a very interesting parallel between the two.
Very interesting. And Linda knows us both. And Theresa, the other thing I would say is that we were very specific in our desire in what our outcomes were to be. I think people need to have that driving force behind them. I'd love to go back to that and say, look, I did this because I wanted to be there for my kids and I wanted to provide for my kids. There was a real motivator there. And I didn't have much of a safety net. It was kill or be killed out here in this world. I don't have a silver spoon. I don't have a bunch of relatives and parents that are going to pay my way. And I had a desire for more than a 1-bedroom apartment with 5 people in it. It's just who I am. So talk a little bit about some of your driving forces. Let's go back into that a little bit and say what motivated you to do all this, if you don't mind.
That's kind of funny. You sound a whole lot more like my husband than me. So mine was the basics. I needed a place to live and food and, take care of my kids, which is part of the reason why I worked outside of the business for such a long time. I mean, we knew that if I was working, then we had the money that we needed. I always worked in a good job. I did have family to back up on. I mean, Brad and I we had, my oldest was a couple months old, and we moved in with my parents for almost a year while we had a house being built, our very first house in Aurora. Wonderful. So, I mean, they were great. We scrimped and saved at that point. I mean, people ask us how we started our business, and literally we started it on our credit cards. I mean, that's what we had. Brad was actually, when we started, Brad was actually still working for the distributor for the equipment that we worked on. And we started the other business at the same time. So he was working 2 jobs. I was trying to work 2 jobs. He was traveling, doing a lot of work, because in the beginning he was doing a lot of field service work. So that was really tough. Brad came from a more modest background than what I did. I came from a family of 6 kids, and we all went to college. And, my mom worked my entire life. My mom, started working in 1947 as a realtor in Denver.
Wonderful.
So I grew up in a different environment where my
crazy, Linda.
My mom always worked, and
I have a real estate license, and I owned a real estate firm here in Northern Virginia with 8 other people. Caitlin and I did real estate. Our parallels, Therese, are incredibly crazy.
I did not realize you were in Virginia, because our office is in Norfolk.
Yeah, I'm about 5 hours north of there, DC, just outside of DC. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Very cool.
Well, you know what's also fascinating about that a little bit, Therese, is that so when you said you're more like Brad, it's so not knowing both of you, except for through osmosis, through our sons' relationships, but knowing enough I can see that because Scott, knowing Brad is the idea, big
visionary.
go, like, visionary. And Therese is the string that holds the kite. And so I just find it really funny too, that Therese had referenced Winnie the Pooh and Caitlin did as well, because very much so that kite and string, I mean, just to reference what you talk about in the book a little bit there, but it's again, very interesting, the parallels, because you have to have both sides, right? Because if both Therese and Brad were these big visionary ideas, you would have probably not accomplished what you were able to accomplish.
No,
one has to be the kite, one has to be the string.
Energy. It takes so much energy.
Yeah.
I don't know how, you talk about going out and having to make your own money and make your own sales and go out and reach people. I couldn't do that. I don't have that personality just to call up and do those. Probably more now as I get older, because I don't have all those fears of what people are going to think about me. But Brad was go.
Right.
Like he takes, he's high energy. And when you're with him, you're like, holy crap. And he comes across as maybe people who know him will say, "Oh, he's just passionate," whereas other people may say, "Holy crap, who is that guy? He's so loud and so out there." But
I'm being
really,
punked right now, Linda. I'm being punked right now. I mean, Teresa, we're running a parallel lives here, and just to ground that, not to make this at all about what you're saying and how it relates to what I'm saying. But one of the things I have found as a coach of the next generation, right? And as someone who wants to pay it forward and get in front of the next generation, you've hit the nail on the head about 3 times in the last 3 minutes when you said, it's a lot of work. And I had 2 jobs and I had to have the safety net. And there's so much about that when people say to me, how did you get here? And how are you so successful? Like I'm saying to you, Therese. How did you get here? How are you so successful? One of the things that I don't think people trip to is the volume of work and or difference between different things. I had real estate. I had my consulting services firm. I had investments. I owned my properties. You had your business. You had real estate. You had other ways of making money, and you had a full-time job until that made sense to shift, right? People don't realize that they're doing 4 things at once, 24/7. And you have to bring that and expect that. It's not just 8 to 5 like the corporate job. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And you're not taking vacations. And or if you take vacations, you're working while you're on the vacation.
100%.
And you know what? There's times when you don't get to take a paycheck. And I think those are some of those things that the employees, when they look at us and say, "Oh, look what they have," or and sometimes I felt really guilty about it. They're struggling to buy a car, and here I am with a new car. And then I sit back and think, what? I worked my ass off for 30-something years.
Yes.
I deserve it. And that's a difficult thing for me, is to say that I deserve something, because I'm not that person.
You worked for it, and you're leading by example is a different way to reframe that too. You worked for it, and you do deserve it. And people do lean on family. I meant to clarify earlier where I felt kill or be killed and I didn't have family to back up on. I was able to borrow a check from my father at one point to make payroll for a few weeks, to your point. So it does take a village. And I just wanted to go back while I had that thought and share with you so that our viewers realize that the services that are needed are all around you. Anyway.
But it goes back to that whole, it takes a village, but also the path to success is not done alone.
Yeah.
So, you've had to, you've got these people that surround you, you've got the relationships, you've got family, all of that plays a role in that it's not you by yourself, forging this path
Right.
all alone with no one doing anything. I think that is the strong message in all of that, because sometimes we like to believe that we're on an island and no one's help, we're just doing it all ourselves. But the reality it is, if you look around, chances are pretty good you've got someone who's anchoring you.
Which is how you can earn what you bought, Therese. Yeah. Don't
Yes.
have guilt. You can't have guilt in that. You can't.
No.
Yeah.
For sure.
Now, I will tell you, when we made the decision to sell the business, you may not be at that point, but I mean, it's one of the things that you look at is you don't have anyone to. We thought about, do we have anyone to pass it down to? Do one of the boys want to do it? And I will say, it's kind of funny because our oldest does now work at the company, but they all worked for the company off and on. And I think they saw it and said, holy crap, that's a lot of work. I don't want to do that.
That's the thing I was saying earlier. Yeah.
Why on earth would I want to take that over when that's so much work when I don't have to do that? Especially the younger generation. But it's kind of funny because now I look at all my boys and they were all entrepreneurial. Hilarious. I mean, you look at what Logan and Joel tried to do, you look at them, you're like, they're struggling, but you know what? They're learning it, and maybe it won't work, and maybe it will work. I don't know. It's not for me to say it will or it won't. My middle son is a chef, and he ended up owning a restaurant for a while. And my oldest son, even though he works for us now because we needed him, he ran he's got his degree in biochemistry from CU, and he started a carpet cleaning business of all things. So, they all end up being entrepreneurs in their own way, but they did not want the business. And so we had to make a decision at some point. I'm 61 years old and I didn't want to work forever. As a matter of fact, if it were up to me, I would have retired at 55 like my father did. No,
I'm going to be 55 next year. I've almost sold the company twice. I'm on board.
Yeah. So we had to make the decision at some point. What are we going to do? How are we going to end this business? Are we just going to stop working? And the biggest thought was all my employees, because I felt like I owed it to my employees. They stayed with us all this time. They helped grow the company. I didn't just grow the company. Brad didn't just grow the company. It was all our employees that were out there with us for all this time to grow the company. So when we went to look for, number one, we were lucky. We never imagined somebody would want to buy my company. But when we found someone to buy the company, the important thing is that it was someone who understood where we are and that we wanted to keep the company together and that our employees were very important to us. And when we sold the business, we shared what we made with our employees. We gave money to our employees based on how long they had been with us. So,
that's wonderful, and you recognize it as they earned it more than you gave it to them too, which is really about your culture.
No, they earned it.
No,
and that's lovely.
That's wonderful.
That's really your message is so important to the next gen. I mean, it's so nice to hear all of that. What is the one thing, if I may just leave the script for a second, Linda? What is the one thing, just the one thing, if they said, is needed for a business owner? I know we've talked about a lot of different things and maybe it's in what we've already talked about, but what is the one thing that just you would say to the next gen if they're going to try and open up their own business they need to be cognizant of?
Listen to other people, maybe talk to other people who, whether they're in that business or like you or like me or, Linda, talk to them about, what did they go through? What did they learn? What mistakes did they make? One of the questions you guys asked is if I had a mentor. I had a mentor in the HR world probably as I was working, but not as far as starting a business. I didn't have anybody telling me how to do things. Everything I did, I learned on my own. And, you talk about wanting to give back a lot of those things, teaching people about those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Whether
so
it's
admirable.
Accounting, tax or how to deal with employees or, any of those things. And to realize that you don't know everything,
Right. Yeah.
I think
that's a really good point.
You did it all. And it's interesting you say that about your mentor and how I can relate to sort of it's lonely at the top, if you will, of the food chain of what you're building. And it really is, really is a gift that we get to share your story and the stories of entrepreneurs here. It really, really impressive. And that's a really good lesson for people to recognize. The work is hard and you might be charting your own path, but listen to other people. Yeah.
Yep. No, I think it's really good. And I like that too. You don't know everything, because sometimes I think that's part of the problem is, especially, when you're young, you're kind of stubborn and you think you've got it all figured out. And so it's really taking that time to, doesn't mean that the other person knows everything, but what can you take and learn from all of those different stories and paths that others have taken? And then how can you incorporate those lessons into what you're trying to do? And that all speaks to relationships, partnerships, mentors, coaching. It all
Goals,
comes together.
habits.
It all just kind of wraps nicely around what the message is around all of this is that there's got to be some structure to what it is that you're doing if you really want to achieve, those objectives that you've set out to. So no, that's really good.
It's funny when you ask the question about relationships and partnerships, and I think relationships are far easier for me than a partnership is. And I have one partnership, obviously, with my husband. We own the business together, but it's way different because we're married and we don't have much of a choice. We've learned how to work it out as a married couple as well as a business partner. And I think working out as a married couple helps us on the other side. But I think in other endeavors that we have tried to work partnerships, they're much more difficult because people want different things out of it. And they don't always align, and you really don't have that. What do you want to say? I think that's why when companies sell, or when you build a company, you want one of them to own 51% and one to own 49%, because there has to be at some point somebody who's got to give and someone who's going to make that decision. And in partnerships, that's really difficult.
That is.
I think our boys have seen that in a couple of the iterations of what they've done with business. That maybe the people that they felt were partners in their business didn't really exactly have the same goals that they did. And at some point there has to be someone who makes that decision, and partnerships are difficult. Everybody wants something different out of that partnership. And I would say it hasn't really worked out great for us in the long term.
Yeah. We had a similar struggle where I had a guy very interested in buying the business. And like you, we were concerned about employees and making sure that all went really well. And we had our first sort of face-to-face. The numbers made sense. Let's have our meeting and figure out what this looks like for next steps. And the first thing I said to him is, what does culture look like for you? You've put on paper, you're interested in keeping the employees and the continuity of service. And everything. And his response was very proud. Well, we offer benefits, health insurance benefits to our employees. And that was sort of my reaction. And it went downhill from there, because I thought, in good conscience, your idea of culture is nowhere near what I've trained and learned myself in building the business for the last 15 years. That does not equal the word culture anywhere around benefits.
No. That's
It's not even a benefit.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's funny. Before we contacted someone to help us sell the business, who, by the way, happens to be back in New Jersey. If you ever need anybody, he's a great guy.
Okay, good to know. Yeah.
We had talked to some other people who were in our industry, and this guy flew out and owns a well-respected company in the business. And Brad and I went out to dinner with them, and we were all excited. And the guy treated our waiter like crap. Just really arrogant and like upset about, whether or not he had come to pour his wine again or something. And I looked at Brad and I said, yeah, this is not what I want. We got up and we left, and they were shocked. They were shocked. The guy was shocked. How dare you? I'm here to talk to you, small company, and I'm big company, and, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, no, not what I want.
Yeah.
I'd rather continue doing what I'm doing than sell it to somebody who would treat another person like that. So
right.
Yeah.
No. Really, really good message.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Therese, we have enjoyed having you on the show so much. We like to end the show with 3 questions. And so what is a common myth about your job or field of expertise?
Common myth. That women don't know technical things. How about that?
Oh, good one.
I like that.
Especially where I'm at. I'm not a big like woman's liver kind of person, but
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's really difficult when you have someone call up on the telephone and I happen to get it and they ask, I need to talk to,
Wow.
I have a question about so-and-so, and I'll be like, okay, let me help you. And like, and no, can I
Yeah.
talk to one of your mechanics, or can I talk and it's like, no, I can answer the question. It's funny. So just real quick, one of the jobs that we did a couple years ago was in Japan. Absolutely awesome. I got to fly to Japan. It turned out that I was the project manager for the job, working on a ship over there. Well, when you're over there, other than your own employees, the work gets done by, if you need any kind of like welding or other technical things that someone else needs to do, they're all Japanese. Well, they're all Japanese men.
Right.
And they don't take orders from women. And I would go down and say, hey, this is what I need done. And I would talk to their lead guy. Next thing you know, the guy's walking up onto the ship and talking to one of my men saying, hey, having this conversation with them. And my guy would look at him and say, well, she's in charge. And the guy would just like drop his head. He'd go. Next day, I'd do the same thing. They kept, probably about the third day, they learned that, hey, I'm in charge. It's not the guys that are in charge.
Right.
And I think after that, we fell into a good pattern, but they weren't going to listen to what a woman had to say. And I will tell you, even though we complain a lot about in the United States about the way the work world is for women, we are far ahead. And especially even in the world of the Navy, when I go on board a ship, I get treated no differently as a woman than what my guys do. So I have to say that's
a good
moved
message
forward a lot. But
women have technical aptitude.
Here's another one. As an HR person, you asked about mentors. Women are really bad about mentoring other women.
I completely
agree. We are our worst enemy. We don't do a very good job. I think that we are jealous or intimidated or don't want to see someone else getting ahead. I think we are far worse as a woman. Both
with each other.
A female
with each other.
I worked in a female dominated job in HR. To a male dominated job, and truthfully, I have done much better in a male dominated world because the men are much easier to work with, and women aren't very good mentors. And if you're a business out, you need to be a good mentor to women.
You do.
Well, the irony of what you're saying is where we don't intersect. I've only had exceptionally well women mentors in environments that are strictly led by women or dominated by women, I should say. So it's ironic that
you're a guy, but you're a guy.
That's the irony, right?
No, so a woman's gonna, we're
Touché.
not intimidated, I guess, by you guys. I don't know what it is, but if you were a woman, it'd be interesting to see how those women would deal with you.
I totally agree. It is. It's a bizarre thing.
I shouldn't say that because I think it's true in anything. I have employees who are very good technically, and they do not want to pass on that information onto younger employees because they're intimidated that if they let go of that information and that knowledge, that somehow it makes them lesser, rather than trying to realizing that, hey, if you train somebody else, it makes you better. But whatever.
No, that's a good point. Well, Therese, my last question for you is, what is the most important lesson you've learned?
Wow. What's the most important? To be humble, I think.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Treat your waiter with respect.
Treat your waiter with respect. Yes.
No,
I'm no, just because I'm no better than anybody else, I guess. Whether because I'm educated or because I have money or whatever it might be. Doesn't make me anybody else, and I need to be humble. We're all going to die. We're all going to die.
That's right.
We're all, right?
We're all going to the same.
In the end, we all.
In the end, we all die. You're absolutely
The older I get, the more I realize what it's like, and.
Mortality is a shitty thing, isn't it?
It is. It's really kind of an insane thing,
It's so true.
And I'm working on my husband retiring, or at least semi-retiring, and it's really hard. It was hard on me at first to let go. this was my business.
Bet.
But the more I let go, the easier it was.
Yeah.
My husband, because he's so passionate about it. But I will tell you, I laugh about being in this bus, but that's one of the things that we decided. He wanted me to travel with him more, and I didn't want to do it without my dogs.
Yeah.
And so the compromise was he went out and bought this bus. So we have this bus, like an entertainer bus, the
nice.
big fancy
Celebrity, celebrity bus.
Yeah. So that's what we're living in San Diego right now, out of the campground with my 3 dogs, so that's I can be with my dogs. Great. And as he's doing that, he's relaxing more and realizing he can step away from work. He could work from this computer that I'm at right now.
That's wonderful. So, that's a lesson to us all, right? Like, work hard, raise your families, find your success, be humble, sell your business, and let's all go get on a bus and enjoy what this world has to offer until we're taken from it.
Right?
I mean, Therese, your themes are incredible, and our viewers are going to love it. Our listeners are going to embrace it, and I couldn't have been more happy to have you here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Therese, for being here.
To you. Just kind of like having a conversation. This was kind of fun.
That's all it is. That's right. That's all it is. Exactly. Well, we're so glad you were able to join us today. And Scott, it's always good to see you. Always enjoy our time together. Well, hopefully our listeners enjoyed this one as much as we did. And we'll see you next time. An Unconventional Guide to Success is an inspirational, motivated series hosted by Scott Montgomery and Linda Misegadis, recorded on Riverside.fm. Music, editing, and production by Logan Misegadis. Check out Scott Montgomery's new book, How Did You Get Here, and all the helpful related materials at www.howdidyougethere.com. Thank you for joining us on our journey. If you would like to reach out to us, our contact information is in the show notes.